I want to welcome everybody to this great program on starting a nonprofit. We have our very own Ramesh Advani with us. He is a Boston business mentor. And we'll be talking about this topic for you today. So I do want to just quickly draw your attention to our website, Boston Business Mentors. You're going to find a lot of great information there. We'll talk a little bit more about that at the end, but we have the workshops, we have blogs, articles, templates, and of course the access to the mentoring for you there. But we'll talk about that later because we got to talk about starting a nonprofit. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Ramesh. You can take it.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. Just starting the afternoon. This is not a workshop that'll strain you with a lot of information, but you will have copies of this, which we can send to you. And I'll go slowly through the slides and I will pause for any questions you have. If you have a question, just put it in the chat and I will answer that as we go along. So I'm sure you've been thinking about this for a while, that I've got this great idea and I want to form a nonprofit entity. So we will cover in this workshop how would you go about getting this entity come to life, not only relative to your mission? How do you get your board of directors together? How do you make sure you have a sustainable fundraising strategy? And then how do you form a legal 501c3? 501c3 is just a lot of government code for basically forming a public charity institution. So when you get donations, the donors can deduct that donation on their tax return. And they can only do that when they make a donation to a 501c3. So that's the objective of today's workshop. And let me just tell you what our process is going to be. I'm going to first take a few minutes and talk about some definitions and what makes a nonprofit different from a for profit organization. And then I'm going to go right into what are the things you must keep in mind when you're forming a nonprofit or a publicly funded organization. Um, Then we're going to go into, sorry, just excuse me for a minute. I just need to turn this phone off. My apologies. We're going to go into when you form this nonprofit, what are the some key roles that you have to keep in mind for your organization? And then we'll spend a good amount of time talking about money, because at the end of the day, that's what you really have to make sure you are able uh, to have your organization exist for a long time. And after we talk about some of those operational things, we're going to go into some specifics about how do you form this nonprofit? What are the steps, the legal steps that you have to take? We'll talk about some fundamentals, and then we'll talk about some next steps um, for in this process for you. Okay, so let me get started with what is a nonprofit and how is it different from a for-profit. So a nonprofit, the acronym everybody uses is NPO, is a non-business entity, not-for-profit organization, or a nonprofit institution. It's a legal entity which is organized and operated for some form of public benefit or social benefit. And so it's an organization that was formed with an idea that this is you are offering something which provides a benefit which has a social impact. And so what happens is that nonprofit, unlike a for profit, is subject to what they call non distribution constraint. Non distribution meaning distribution of what? Distribution of any revenues, any income that comes in that exceeds the expenses that are incurred by the organization cannot be distributed to the owners. And those extra funds must be committed to the organization's purpose, not taken by any private parties. So that's a very significant thing. That's what makes it a nonprofit. So you pay no taxes when when you make more money than what you spend in running that nonprofit. So what are the differences from a for-profit? A for profit entity is one that operates as a business. A nonprofit also operates as a business, but the aim of the for profit is to generate a profit for the owners of that for profit. And the profit that it makes, the entity pays taxes, and then what's left over, it distributes the remainder profits to its owners. And so, you know what a public entity's profits when they're distributed, because there's more than one owner, their distribution is called dividends. But they don't have to distribute profits. They can also reinvest it to grow the company. A nonprofit pays no taxes, but the most interesting um, quality of a nonprofit is that no one owns a nonprofit. So even if you are the founder, you don't own the nonprofit. Whereas in a for profit, there are owners of the for profit. A nonprofit can do something that a for profit cannot do. A nonprofit can raise public funds, and because there is no owner, but it's the public that owns it, they have to be accountable and be transparent in the use of the funds that they get from the public. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, why and how. There is one key element which is the same for a for profit and a non-profit. Both of the types of organizations must accomplish their mission if they're going to continue to exist. And they must make enough money to not only stay in business, but also be able to meet the competition. So when you think about you want to form a nonprofit has competition from other nonprofits who are also trying to possibly accomplish the same mission. They might be doing it for a different community or could be doing it for the same community that is you are looking to serve. So in simple terms, I'm trying to tell you the difference between a for profit and a not for profit. I'll pause briefly. Any questions on this?
There are none posted, but I definitely think strongly encourage you to answer or to submit questions to chat if you have any along the way.
Great. Okay. So, as long as you understand the difference, now let's get into the world of the nonprofit. When you form a nonprofit, there are certain rules you have to keep in mind. I've listed the four most important rules that you have for a publicly funded organization. The first one is be transparent and make sure that you meet all the requirements for reporting and filing federal and state requirements. So even though you're not paying taxes, there is a regular annual reporting that you have to do. So keep that in mind and always make sure you're doing this filing and reporting on a timely basis. We won't go into the details of what these are, but as we go through it, I'll be constantly singing the same song, and which is for you to really dive deeper. Uh, we would encourage you to set up time with a Boston business mentor, say like myself, and we would, in confidence and one on one, we would set up mentoring and guide you on how you should go about establishing this nonprofit. And that's when we'll talk about reporting, etc. The second requirement is you have to have something called the nonprofit bylaws, the organizational bylaws. These have to be documented. And you also need to have something called the articles of organization. This, you're required to have these. The organizational bylaws are essentially, think of that's like an operating manual that you have to have for running your nonprofit. The articles of organization are something that you will write, but that's a public document that you will file with the state. The third must is you, when you do the reporting to the federal government and to the state, anyone who is highly compensated as an employee, say, for example, the executive director of the nonprofit or as an officer, the salaries that you pay, they have to be publicly reported. So it's public information, and that's the third must. And the fourth one is every nonprofit. Remember, I said a little while ago, no one owns a nonprofit. So then who is in charge? Well, the people who are in charge are the board of directors. And the board of directors for a nonprofit, they all do their jobs all pro bono. They cannot be paid a salary. They have to make sure that you have a competent board, and they're the ones who provide governance and oversight of the operations. They are not given any financial incentives. But if you're going to have a competent and a motivated board, they've got to be people who will believe in the mission of the organization. So if you keep these four things in mind, that's the most important thing you have to do as you're forming this nonprofit. Any questions?
There's no questions.
Okay. So, what are some of the key roles that you have to have in a nonprofit? I mentioned the board of directors. So, in your bylaws, you would specify in your charter of your nonprofit how many members should there be on the board. At a very minimum, you need to have these three positions. You have to have a chair of the board of directors, you have to have a treasurer, and you have to have a secretary. Sometimes they also call it a clerk. So the chair obviously is the main person. The treasurer is responsible. I mean, the board of directors legally is completely responsible for everything related to the nonprofit, but very specifically, the person who signs off on everything as far as money goes is the treasurer, and the person who keeps the minutes of the board meetings and does all the filings is the secretary. So the board of directors has to have a minimum of three. We generally recommend, I tell people you're going to start off, have at least 5 members on your board of directors. You should have a couple of people, in addition to the 3 that are mentioned here, people who believe in the mission of the organization, are involved in the community or in that particular sector, and have good networking and fundraising skills, who would participate with you as you're making this happen. So you could be the chair of the board of directors initially, and you could then continue down the road and hire as you have an executive management, you need a minimum of a CEO, or in the nonprofit world, they call them executive director. So initially, you could wear both hats as a chair and an executive director. If you wear both hats, you can get paid a salary as an executive director, but not as a chair. And because it's kind of an unusual provision that nonprofits are allowed to have when they're small, um, that would have to be compensation for the executive director, would have to be spelled out in your bylaws and would have to be voted on by the board of directors. And of course, it's public information. As time goes on, you'll probably have, the day-to-day operations will be managed by the executive management, the executive director, and the staff of the executive director. So where would you need staff? You would need staff for the operations. You would need staff for finance, for fundraising, for marketing, information technology, etc. Think about this as any organization, whether it's in the business of making and selling products or services. Here you're offering services through your nonprofit, so you would need a staff, and the roles would have to be clearly defined. You'd have job descriptions for all of these positions, and these positions would have to be approved, by your board of directors. So not complicated, but you're basically spreading the workload amongst your staff. Any questions on this?
No questions.
Okay. So let's get to the most important part of what you're trying to do as a nonprofit. So you have to make sure that all your costs are covered in order to meet the mission and to stay in business, not just meet the costs in a given year at startup or as you're expanding. Every year, you should make sure your costs are being covered. So, obviously, you'll have a budget for that and you'll have revenues, and you must make sure you generate enough revenues to cover all your costs. Otherwise, you're basically going out of business. Now, what happens, unlike for a for profit, when you're offering services from a nonprofit, you might be offering these services at cost or even below cost. So the revenues that a nonprofit generates from services does not always cover all the costs. This is a fact of life for nonprofits, whether you've been in business for many, many years as a nonprofit or you're just getting started, or even if you're a well known nonprofit. So, for example, the Boston Symphony Orchestra is a nonprofit. The Mass General Hospital is a nonprofit. Um, United Methodist Church, that's a nonprofit. Um, they all may have been in existence for many, many years, but they also need to make sure they do fundraising. So, fundraising is important because the services they provide uh, incur costs, and you can't possibly be charging people for the services equal to your costs. Because think about it for a minute. A nonprofit offers human services. Human services are offered by other human beings. So you have a staff, you have to pay salaries, say to the CEO, you have to pay salaries to the senior staff, to the employees, and human costs, salaries don't stay fixed. They have to keep going up to cover inflation and cost of living. So the costs uh, keep increasing at whatever pace they would increase. So you may not be able to have your services keep increasing in cost to your clients. A matter of fact, you might be offering services at no cost, free of charge. So you have to do fundraising, And how do you do fundraising? You have donors and you also have grants. It's very important to make sure you realize the source of money is not just from the services, but also from your donors and from grants. And naturally, if you are doing a good job of you're meeting your mission, you can have donors interested in what you're doing and they'll care for the same cause. So, for example, I'll give you an example. A very well known nonprofit in the Boston area is the Greater Boston Food Bank. The Greater Boston Food Bank helps meet the needs of people who are not able to feed themselves or their families. And the cause and the mission of the Greater Boston Food Bank is something that's supported by many donors. And there are donors who will make repeat donations every year. They might even leave in their legacy donations for the nonprofit. So it's very important to realize that you need to raise money not just from services, but from donors and grants, and then try to get repeat donations. Uh, One of the most successful things, for example, a nonprofit can do is to get apply for a grant and get a multi-year grant. So the donor organization will say, okay, we are going to donate $200,000 and it's going to be spread out over 3 years. What this does is reassures the nonprofit that you've got money coming in even 2 years from now or 3 years from now. And in order to make sure you get repeat donations and a broad base of donors, you have to make sure that you have good outcomes, good results from your mission, and you are able to communicate that on a regular basis to the public and to your donors. And it has to be done on a timely basis. So you can't just say, okay, every year I'll put out one report. You may have every 3 months want to give everybody an update. Well, this is what we achieved. These are the people we served, or this is what our goal was in terms of making XYZ happen and how we exceeded it or how we met it. So money plays a big part, whether you're for profit or not for profit. But for nonprofit, fundraising becomes a very important part of money. Any questions on this?
No one has posted any questions.
Okay, I hope that means everybody is, I'm explaining it okay. All right, so let me move on. I'll continue with the money part of it. So, if we're saying you need to have clear communications and donors, um, you have to make sure right up front when you're getting started that you're clear about your vision for the nonprofit and you define a mission that is based on that clear vision and you're able to articulate that mission. And you will articulate that mission and try to raise funding from a range of sources. It's very important that anyone who's on the board or also the executive director, you have to look to that group of people who can make this funding happen, who understand the mission, understand the vision. So, one key element is as you're trying to form this nonprofit is bring people up on your board and ask them if they're willing to serve on the board. And to do that, they have to buy into the mission and say, yes, I believe this is a very good cause and I want to be part of it and I want to make a difference in the community. So let me just at a very high level go through what are the sources of funding. A lot of people say, oh my goodness, I don't know how to ask people for money or where can I really get that? You will be surprised at how much it matters that you believe in your mission and you're able to articulate it and even give an elevator pitch on that, there are many sources of funding. So I'm just listing at a very high level what some of these sources are. Clearly, when you come to BBM and meet one of our nonprofit um, uh, sector mentors, like myself, we'd be able to tell you, okay, how do you approach other individual donors, direct contributions, fundraising events, the board members, foundations. Foundations give out grants, companies, corporations give out grants, the government gives out grants and contracts. When I say government, I mean state government, the federal government, and also many times large city governments also give out grants. um, Religious institutions, there are private interest groups who form giving circles, there are community organizations, there are many, many sources of funding. So remember, you might be offering services at a cost to your clients. So that is one source of revenue. But these are sources of what we call non service revenues for the nonprofit. The most important thing, and there on the right hand side in bright red, you can see you should do research in your area to see what are the local sources available that are interested in helping you meet your mission, and then also dive into finding out what are their requirements and what is their process, and then pursue them. So don't pursue them alone, you pursue them through your board members. So if you have board members, for example, who are really involved in the community, or also people who are networked, they might know how to go about it uh, and get money for you. Any questions on this?
I don't have a question on this, but if you don't mind circling back a little bit. Um,
Sure.
so what about the pre-registration or pre-formalization process cover? Can you talk a little bit about that and how do you test out your idea first?
So hold that question. I'm going to go into what are the steps that you take to forming a nonprofit. I will get into that at that time.
Okay.
Okay. So just, I'm still going to go on with the money part of it. Um, what what you have to do is, as you're forming a board of directors, find out about who would support the same mission. And as you talk about this, and you would talk about, okay, how are you going to, what are you going to do? How are you going to work on making this nonprofit deliver services? So you have to convince them to invest their time or their money. So it's not always money. There might be people who might say, you know what, I might not be able to write a check, but I'm willing to work for your nonprofit and I can provide my time, I can provide in kind services. So, for example, if somebody says, say you are, let's say, in a mission to provide um, education uh, to children who are in any deprived or underprivileged community. So somebody might say, I'm willing to offer my time and provide teaching. I can teach or I can tutor and I will do it free of charge. So there you go. You have, uh, it's just as powerful as getting money from them because you're getting in kind services. To start with, you should make sure you do your outreach. And to some degree, Teresa's comment and ask, how do you get going as you're talking about your mission? You reach out to potential board members. So if a potential board member is willing to offer the money or a potential donor, then that's how you'll know whether they really like the idea and are willing to put their money, where their mouth is. Um, Once you've got a board together, which is clearly, as you can tell from the way I'm saying it, you've got to have a board in place. Then the board has to also commit to using their time to do outreach to their network. And remember, if somebody says, sure, I can give you $50, can give you $100. They don't have to give you $100,000. Of course, if they give you $100,000, it's a lot better than $100, but no donation is too small. Time or money, or time and money, obviously, that's very important. So I really wanted to make sure that I sort of got this message across before I go down the road of how will you form this nonprofit. Uh, any other questions related to? We can get into when you do get together with the BBM mentor, or I'll talk about another workshop that I'm going to do next month. I will talk about specific organizations that are grant giving organizations or corporate organizations, from where you can get money, more detail, but you get the general idea from this. Any questions, Teresa, from anyone?
Nope.
Okay, so I'm going to spend a little bit more time on this. So let's say you've got your idea, you are clear on your vision and mission, and you've got it written down, you've got an elevator pitch. The first thing you have to do is find 3 to 5 people. As I said, a minimum of 3 board members, but try to find 5 who believe in the same mission. Now, this could well be people who are in your community or your friends, and have been wrestling with the same uh, concern that's going on in the community, and they want to also help try to solve that or to provide services. So your first step is find such people and who are willing to join you on your board and form the board. So then it becomes a very formal thing. So you work with them and ask them what kind of a role they want to play. Now, somebody might be willing to play the role of a treasurer. Somebody might be willing to be the secretary. Someone might be willing to be a community liaison board member. Someone might be interested in fundraising. So talk through this. And obviously, what you're asking from them is their time. So initially, when you're forming the board and the first year of the existence of nonprofit, it will require more time than maybe down the road. So make sure you sort of spell that out. And clearly, you may not know everything about it. So you have to tell them, hey, you've got to keep an open mind on this, and you have to be persuasive. Make sure that you've got your organization vision and mission, and you might be able to get them to participate and draw the mission and vision together so that there is an element of ownership, that the board members initially who form this nonprofit, they have a stake in the whole thing, and put it in writing. Now, once you've defined the mission, then you have to write the articles of organization. Now, we have templates for that, and we can help you write the articles of organization. And then, taking the articles of organization, you then create a legal nonprofit entity with the Secretary of State for Massachusetts, with the Commonwealth. You file that articles of organization, and then they will give you permission, and you will come into existence with a piece of paper. Once you've got the organization in existence, then you write up the bylaws and define the bylaws. As I said, this is the internal operating manual and that'll define how the board will operate and how they'll make decisions, like how many board members, how often will they meet, what will be the term of a board member, how long will it last, etc., etc. There are many people who will form a nonprofit and they will file the articles of organization and the bylaws at the same time with the state. You don't have to file the bylaws, but they might also still draw them up and then do the filing with the state. The next thing I always emphasize is no matter how much advice you get from a mentor who is counseling you or how much you know of that particular field. So, say you might be someone who's worked in the education field for a long time, and you say, oh, I really understand this because you've been providing those services. Um, Always make sure that the nonprofit is going to hire two specific professional functions. One is have a legal counsel, a legal advisor. Now, what happens is there are many large law firms that do offer pro bono legal counseling service on an ongoing basis to nonprofit. So if you have a connection with a law firm, see if you can get somebody there who is interested and also in helping your mission. They might be willing to do it free of charge. But if not, of course, that's a cost that you have to bear. And an accounting help. When I say accounting help, the accountant will help you manage. It will help. When I say you, I mean it'll help. They'll help your executive finance position. You know, your CFO and your treasurer, or initially maybe just the treasurer, with the accounting part of what's required, keeping track of your expenses, keeping track of your revenues, and also then to help file uh, your federal uh, filing documents. So even though you are a nonprofit, uh, even the nonprofit has the equivalent of a legal formal filing to be done with the federal government. So for a for-profit world, for example, you file an income tax return that's like a 1040, or if you're a corporation, you file corporate income taxes. A nonprofit files something which is called a nonprofit. There's a number for it. It's called a 990, and the accountant or whoever provides those accounting help will help prepare that from your books and will help you file that. So when you engage a professional legal and accounting help, then the next thing you do is you apply for an employer identification number. Think about this as a social security number for your nonprofit. The federal government, the IRS, issues this, and once you have got this EIN number, then what you do is you working with your board, the treasurer, and let's say you're the chair of the board, you will develop a projection of the costs of the services that you're going to be offering. And you will develop a projection of the revenues. And once you've got those projections, then there is a form to apply for a federal tax exemption status. And you apply for that, you're basically applying to become a 501c3. And so this is the order, step by step, how you have to go about doing this. We have templates to help you do your articles of organization. We have templates telling you how to write up your bylaws. We have links to the state Secretary of State's office. We have links for the IRS to help you develop all of this. Let me pause here to see what questions come to your mind before I can dive a little bit more into what Teresa asked earlier.
Yeah, you've stopped your slideshow. We're back on into PowerPoint view. Um,
Yeah. You're what?
can you put it back to run slide? Yeah, there you go. Thank you.
Oh, I didn't do anything.
It just clicked over. I don't know, but we're good.
While I was talking, could you see the bullet points?
We did, and then it switched over to the PowerPoint for a second.
Oh, okay, okay. Sorry about that. I apologize.
No problem. I don't have any new questions.
Okay. Um, so, Teresa, you asked the question, well, how do you get going on trying to get people engaged? What are the first steps? How do you test out your ideas? So clearly, before your mission is written, and you want to get people involved, you should test out your ideas and say, if we were to offer this, um, how can we do it? And what do you think? So definitely do that. But remember, you don't exist as a legal entity. You don't exist as a 501(c)(3). So you can't go around asking people, well, how about, can you give me $500 and I'll, try this? You can't do that. You have to make this so that it's professional and formal. I don't know. Does that answer the question, Teresa, the person who asked you that?
Well, if they would like to put into chat or into Q&A and let us know if they want further clarification on that, that would be great.
Okay. Um, let's see. Um, so those are the steps. I just want to share some thoughts on some business fundamentals as you're forming this nonprofit, uh, about the marketplace and about yourself. Um, if you want to offer a nonprofit in a given area, you should do some research, some market research to see and find out who else is operating in that space and try to connect with them and learn from them. You could possibly also see if they're willing to have you get engaged with them and find out how they do it. And if you see, oh, well, there are these things I can do better with another team, see what you can do better. The third bullet is very important, especially for a nonprofit. Explore who is willing to collaborate with you and cooperate with you. So, while there may be competition, nonprofits um, are open to collaboration and cooperation. Of course, they might be very competitive when it comes to fundraising and grants. So they think, oh my God, here's somebody else coming into the space and they're going to take away from me getting a grant. So you need to, your skills of cooperation and collaboration are very important. Um, you might be able to, if you see there are things you can do better, uh, explore synergies between what you want to do and what they're doing, because these synergies might benefit the clients that you're both serving. So, for example, I'm involved with a nonprofit that provides helps homeless elders, provides them a home, a permanent shelter, whereas there are shelters who provide temporary housing and living. So we work closely with those organizations because we are basically trying to serve the same population. When you're getting started, think of yourself as an early stage startup. And at an early stage startup, you are going to want to apply to grants, and you may not have written grants yourself before, or you may not know how to write a grant. You should see if you can retain a grant writer, and you could retain a grant writer either on an hourly basis or for a fixed price. Write this grant for me, and then you submit the grant to the donor. Um, if the grant writer can possibly also give you an application template, I can draft it for you, and then you could use it to do multiple applications, and you can research the potential funders that you can have, and then use that same one, so that just to get going on the whole grant writing process. The This slide, always like to talk about. You need, there are some fundamentals about getting into business or being an entrepreneur. You should be a person who really understands your own strengths and gaps. The first thing is, will your circumstances allow you to spend the time and energy which are needed to make sure your organization becomes an established nonprofit? Because you're giving of yourself, you should know what you're good at. And you should also know who would be interested in being involved actively in the same cause. Again, this is the board of directors. You should be very honest with yourself. What are you not good at? Are you good at fundraising? Are you not good at documentation? How will you recruit to fill the experience and expertise gaps that you have? No one can be a success for an organization if you don't have a team, and you're building your team, and it's make sure that you're building your team to fill in the gaps that you're not good at. So as you're trying to recruit people, you ask them and find out about those areas. And so the next question is really recruiting. How will you help? How will you find people? How do you go about it? Obviously, with friends and family, in your community, in your town, in your city. How will you find those people? And clearly, and as you know, as you yourself may have coached people, or you have children, they get good at sports because they have a good coach. Are you capable of motivating and leading the team? Because once the day-to-day challenges of any organization creep in, people need to be motivated, and they need to be led. And if you are an expert at something, are you willing to trust and delegate and pass that on? And so that they're doing the work and you're not doing everything yourself. And are you willing to have them make errors, and you help them sort through those errors and train them? So these are some. If you were involved in a for profit, I would tell you the same things. You're basically taking an inventory of yourself and saying, okay, how am I going to fill the gaps, or how am I going to reinforce what I'm good at to expand that and form the team? Any questions on this?
I do not have a question, but I did get the question was answered from the previous. So,
Okay, thank you. So that's basically the whole webinar. I want to tell you what the next steps should be. Gather your thoughts and write out your answers to what you've learned today. Where there are things that you want to know more of, or where do you think you might want to do more work, and just ask for a meeting. And I think, Teresa, I'm going to turn it back to you. Um, to meet either to see how people can go about this, because it's whatever we do is all free.
yeah, so there's the QR code right there to request a mentor. And I will personally make sure you get connected with somebody if your question is in the nonprofit arena or a different business topic. We'll make sure you're connected to the right person that can assist you. Don't forget to watch for our newsletters for all of our upcoming workshops and webinars. We'll be taking a little bit of time off in July, but watch for everything coming up the last part of the summer and into fall. And Yeah, and yeah, don't forget about the website with our great blog articles. We're constantly adding new topics. There's some really great ones in there. Um, okay, I think that covers everything. I just want to thank Ramesh for donating your time today to talk about this important topic. And thank you for everyone that was with us today. We hope to see you on June 25th for funding your nonprofit. I did put that link to registration in the chat. If you miss it, no worries. Just go to the website and look under workshops and register through there. All right. Have a great holiday weekend, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Teresa. I appreciate it.
Bye.
Bye.